Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a step that was very difficult for me to take. It's called Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Man, was that a mouthful. I was raised as a Catholic, an Irish Catholic in a working class family. I went to a Catholic high school from which I was expelled, which gave me a real resentment. And I became my own higher power. Alcohol and drugs really became my higher power, because once I was hooked on them, I did what they told me to do. So for me to get sober and stay sober, my sponsor told me, which is something else I suggest you get a sponsor, someone who's done what you're trying to do. He told me, you've got to make a decision. Decision means to cut away. That's actually the Latin root of decision. To cut away from your own beliefs, your old limiting beliefs, and try to figure out what works, not what you think should work, not what your prejudices tell you, but keep an open mind. Get honest, open-minded, right, and willing to try something different. So when I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him, it was a difficult run. Because number one is, I had no understanding. I had no idea what this higher power was. I didn't like the word God because of my own prejudices. And when I made that decision to turn my will over, hey, what am I supposed to do? How am I going to turn my will over? Don't I make the decisions in my life? Didn't this so-called God give me a free will? These are questions I started asking myself. Now that's why I needed to work with somebody else. That's why I needed to be back to that first step, part of the we admitted. So this is what happened. I started talking to my sponsor and he says, listen, if you cannot get this step, if you cannot come up with a God of your understanding, something that you can lean on in times of trouble and stress, even in success, that keeps you right size, because all the steps are really created to keep me humble, to keep me the right size, not let my ego get out of control, remind me of who I am and what I am. How can I get this God of my understanding? I don't understand God at all. I don't even know if I believe in God. He said, we want you to get some humility. Before you go to bed, get down on your knees and just say, God, I don't know if you're out there. I don't know what's going on, but I could really use a hand. Thanks for keeping me sober. So that's what I tried. I was willing to try anything because my way just wasn't working. The first time my wife walked in the room and I was on my knees, I wanted to crawl under the bed. I was so embarrassed. Oh, look at me on my knees praying to God. And that shows you just how sick I was. Really, all the things I had done, all the lying, cheating, manipulating that I had done, and here I am, embarrassed that I'm asking my higher power, a God of my understanding, for help in staying sober. That shows you where I was at. But I was so willing to try anything, not to go back to the life of addiction I was living, because I had hit such a brutal bottom that I didn't want to go back there. That when my sponsor told me, hey, if you can't remember to get on your knees at night, when you come home, throw your shoes under the bed. You'll have to get on your knees to go reach them out. But get in that habit. What's a habit? Just a learned skill we develop through repetition. Of getting on your knees when you wake up in the morning, saying, thank you, God, for another day of life. Thank you, God, for keeping me sober today. Please let me know what your will is, not my will. Give me the strength to carry that out. And at night, thank you for the opportunity to have another day. I did that, and things got consistently better. I said, how do I understand this, guys? I told him about the God of my youth, about the punishing God, about the vindictive God, about the God of all these rules. He says, well, if you can give God characteristics, what characteristics would you give God? I said, well, it'd be loving, and it'd be forgiving, and it'd be kind, and I gave him a whole list of things. He says, write them down. I wrote all these things down. He says, okay, there's your God. I said, what do you mean? He says, it doesn't have to be God of your childhood. It doesn't have to be God of somebody else's religion. It's a God of your understanding. So if that's what you understand God to be, there you go. Hang it up. That's your idea of God. A God of my understanding is in constant flux. It grows and it changes as my sobriety increases, as my life changes. But the idea is I had to start. I had to be willing to make a decision and never turn back. It's amazing. I take my will back. I do take my will back. I haven't taken my will back to the point where I've had to pick up a drink or a drug. So when I get to that point, when I find myself acting on self-will, and my self-will runs riot real quick, I can step back and say, God, your will, not mine, be done, and really mean it, and stick to that decision. And that decision has been the greatest joy of my entire life.